right. Well, why don't we get going? It's 2 p.m. How does that sound? Okay,
Good to
great.
me.
Cool. All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jessica Zambri, and I am a teacher with Studio B. I teach mindfulness and meditation practice, and I have a love of music. Music has been a part of my life for as long as I can really remember. And so I really love to explore weaving in music and meditation practice as a way to connect to myself and to others and ultimately everything around me. And a little bit more about Studio B. Studio B is a global well-tech company focused on cultivating collective well-being, emphasizing both the personal and the professional aspects of what it means to be well. We are a women-owned organization with a deep commitment to the ongoing and lifelong practice of being accessible and inclusive. We have a deep commitment inside of our community, and we recently opened up a global co-op virtual online space for teachers from across the globe to share practices in mindfulness, meditation, yoga, horticulture, herbalism, creative expression, and beyond. So it's a really a space in learning and sharing and connecting. And it's inside of these spaces where I first met my dear friend Tushar Bhagat, and he's here today with us. I would love to tell you a little bit more about him if you don't know him already. So to give you some context, Tushar grew up in a household with a strong yoga and mindfulness practice. First learning these practices from his parents over 30 years ago. And he began his formal training in middle school and high school, first beginning to attend 10-day silent Vipassana retreats near Mumbai, India. He's formally trained as a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher through the University of Massachusetts Medical Center and Brown University, and he teaches in the New York City area. He's also an accomplished biomedical scientist and research assistant professor of oncology at Albert Einstein College, teaches MBSR and other stress reduction programs to cancer patients, to graduate and medical students, medical residents and fellows, in addition to doctors and therapists and the scientists and staff at his academic institution. Aside from translational cancer research, he's pursuing research in mindfulness-based well-being for professionals in the professional communities. So this is a little bit about Tushar. I want to welcome everyone here. And Tushar, welcome. Hi. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, it's very nice to see you, Jessica. And I'm grateful for the kind introduction. And particularly, this is fun for me because I know Jessica. We are in similar training for MBSR. And it's wonderful to see you all here joining in the middle of Friday. Hopefully, your week is coming up to a very restful end. So I'm glad to be here and would love to engage with you all.
Thank you, Tushar. Well, I first introduced you, and I just want to be aware of how much is in that introduction. There's so much there about your journey, and I just want to open that up to see if there's anything that you want to add and even expand upon inside of your journey with mindfulness and meditation in particular here.
So all that training, it sounds like a bunch of things, accomplishments, and so on. But what it doesn't show or talk about is the human interaction that I had a chance to have along the way, which is in different parts of India, and the culture varies. It's a decently large country. So I got to meet many different types of people across multiple religions. India is a multicultural society and multi-religion society, with some of the very ancient religions still thriving there, like Zoroastrianism, including Judaism. And then moving on to Israel for some of my training and to getting a chance to learn about yet another diverse community and multicultural society there. And then coming to US to the South somehow south, West Virginia, and then Georgia, and then New York. And getting a chance to travel around really got me to learn about the different types of people, even cultures within the United States. And this part of my learning experience has taught me a lot. And I carry that with me in my teaching, with my future interactions with people. So that's the only thing that I would like to add that may not be very apparent through the conventional apparent training that we talk about.
Hmm.
Thank you for asking, Jessica.
Thanks, Tushar. I appreciate you bringing some more context to your journey. And yeah, it makes me think about recently inside of, so Tushar and I both, I think, developed a friendship, I'll say, inside of the MBSR community, the mindfulness-based stress reduction community, of which we're both teachers in the New York area. And although I'll just say Tushar's been teaching far more than I have. And so it's lovely to have him as a guide and inspiration as well. So, but really, Tushar, recently we were inside of one of these collaborative meetings with MBSR, and you were guiding us and leading a seminar around inclusivity and accessibility, particularly with opening up spaces inside of MBSR, but certainly beyond for folks in the Black, Indigenous, people of color communities. And I wondered if you can just speak a little bit more to that, because as you were telling us about your journey, I'm aware of the vast cultural, the context of which that's different for different people, and how unique it is to meet in a group and have so many different perspectives and experiences come together.
Yeah, this is whole another element of, let's say, human society, which kind of is intricately intertwined with the mindfulness world. So the workshop or the meeting that Jessica is talking about was about how to make mindfulness spaces more inclusive of minorities. In this case, particularly the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. And I find myself to be living in an academic bubble along the way. And the academic bubble, as there are some academics here, they would probably agree, is very international and very, let's say, relatively speaking, inclusive. Because of the diversity of people, it naturally becomes more accepting. Again, relatively speaking, there are again exceptions to this norm. However, when I stepped out of this academic bubble, out of grad school and out of the scientific world, and dwelled into the mindfulness world in MBSR training and multiple mindfulness groups in New York Cities and elsewhere, that's when I really got a chance to interact with these intricacies of racial relations between different communities, and how very often, um, I can speak for my experience, I felt slightly isolated in this world because there are not a whole lot of people of color, Black, Indigenous, people of color in this community for all sorts of reasons. However, this is the reality now. And somehow it's a challenge for, let's say, multiple sides, for many different racial communities and the dominant community, particularly the white community. Um, the people are all walking on eggshells. They probably don't know what to do. They feel afraid to speak up. So I was trying to open up a dialogue between these groups. And my expectations from, let's say, the mindfulness teachers is that they would be hopefully more inclusive, relatively speaking, to, let's say, quote unquote, the conventional world. And that's why my, let's say, striving or my expectations are higher there. However, the summary of that whole meeting, in general, the state of inclusivity is, I should say, still has a lot of room. And what I personally find could help is really speaking to any person that one comes across in regular life or in the mindfulness world to really learn about them. Because I forget the name of this musician who came from Europe, I think, and he was a person of color. He was a black man, and people were hating him for being black. And he was new to racism in America. He was new to racism, period. So he didn't know, why are they hating him? He was asking questions about, if these people don't know me, how can they hate me? He was so naive. However, he kept interacting with people who would show up at the bar where he was playing. And they were members of, I mean, some of you probably know this story, so pardon me if you already heard this. And there were members of KKK there who became friends with him because he was a fine musician. And they got to learn about him and they know him as a person a little bit more. Long story short, the particular KKK group in the Northeast here that he was talking with, he didn't know that that's what they were. It slowly dissolved after they knew him, after they knew the Black community that they interacted with, once they interacted with. So why I'm sharing this story is that this is a very good example of how learning about a person from a different culture, could be a Black person, indigenous people, a brown person, a Latino person, it could be an immigrant from a country that you've not heard about. Knowing that person makes it more likely um, for someone to be more accepting, more inclusive. So I encourage all mindfulness teachers, yoga teachers, and many different types of teachers to really engage with people when they see a real person, whether that's on Zoom live or whether that is in person. Besides obviously taking all these courses about Wide Awake, I think Jessica and my friend Mary, no, Jessica and a few others, they have taken this course, which tells you really helpful information about how to navigate this world to promote inclusivity. So that's my long answer to your question. I hope it addresses it.
Mm, thank you, Tushar. I appreciate that. Um, and I think you touched a little bit about how you might approach this inside of your approach to teaching, but because there may be some teachers on this call, specifically in the community of Studio B, but for even outside of that, are there ways maybe in your classroom, so to speak, that you can practice inclusivity, and what are the ways have you inside of the classroom?
That's a very practical question, very useful. Thank you for asking. So I can give an example of, let's say, one particular mindfulness classroom. I can use the example of MBSR, which I get a chance to teach more frequently. Uh, so whether that is MBSR or it is some other class or course or workshop, if it's a multi-week workshop, this is what I do. I try to reach out to each person in the group, and that's limited by the number of people. So if there are 35 people, I talk to each one of these people one-on-one. Try to really understand where they're coming from, what are they expecting, what would they like to know about me besides what they read on the website. So my goal is to really form this human connection, and I aspire towards forming this trust between us, because I believe that if they trust me, if they really know what my intentions are, they are more likely to listen to me. They're more likely to do the practices that I ask them of. Now, how does this play out into inclusivity? Let's say if there are people of different communities, if they are Black people or let's say Southeast Asian people or immigrants, um, once they know that my intention is to create a safe space here, and I convey this as often as I can, and I got feedback from them that they are more, let's say, motivated to do the practices, show up regularly because they believe that I have good intentions to help them in this. But let's say if I can hypothesize and say if I was a white teacher, what would I do? I find in my experience there people of color are fewer in number. They are very limited. Sometimes I only have one or two in the class of 35. So if I were a teacher from a dominant group, what I would do is I would try to engage with them, particularly when there's a chance to discuss, either one or in a group, not calling out on them, but really encouraging the quiet voices to speak up. And then if I find that after a few sessions, they still don't speak up, I reach out to them by email and say, is there some way I can help you? How are you feeling in this course so far? Because I really want you to feel included. I really want you to feel heard. So it takes some extra effort, but if one really wishes to promote this and really wishes to make a difference in the tension that there is between races and communities, this is what I do in my classrooms, and it seems to kind of work from what I get as feedback at the end.
Mm. Thanks for letting us in a little bit with your experience in teaching, Tushar. And I'll just name too. I noticed as we began this meeting, and for folks that came on a little later, Tushar was welcoming people and naming each square on Zoom as they were coming up. And I just was aware that this is a way to see people and to just acknowledge, okay, you're here, I see you. And I just found that to be powerful just for me. Um, and so something I'll look to practice in a future classroom. Um, Thank you, Tushar. I also want to acknowledge that all of this is here, and we're also experiencing this global pandemic. It's about a year ago today that the World Health Organization acknowledged that COVID-19 was indeed the pandemic that it was. And so the BIPOC community in particular are disproportionately affected by this pandemic. And I just want to make a couple notes here that, um, yes, to mention that the CDC's COVID-19 data tracker shows that the death rates due to COVID-19 are highest amongst Black, Indigenous people, followed by Pacific Islanders and Latinx people. And so also to make a note that sometimes there's a, oh, well, why is that? And even for myself, I'm inside of this investigation. And I just want to say before I or anyone jumps into any conclusions about this racial disparity being due to genetic factors, I want to point out that there's no scientific basis for that. In fact, there's no scientific evidence at all that different races have different genetic identities. So I may be more genetically similar to someone of a different race than to someone that has the same race as me. So what the research has shown is that it's more difficult for BIPOC communities to remain safe during the pandemic. And there's a majority of reasons for that, of which we don't have to go into the exhaustive list now, but just to say that the majority of BIPOC community are essential workers and less able to work from home, depending on public transportation, living in communities with less access to grocery stores, and the indigenous territories, particularly the Navajo Nation, have less access to clean water. So you can't, practice washing your hands effectively. And so there's also limited access to primary care physicians, and COVID-19 testing sites have been scarce and far between inside of these communities, and the list goes on and on and on. And I just want to highlight that here and also ask, how has this affected your experience professionally and personally?
Mm. Oh boy, this is a this is a big elephant in the room that we got to talk about. And as I intricately work in the healthcare system in the medical science, I do get to hear firsthand what's going on in terms of the disparity and about how this pandemic is affecting people of different minorities differently. But in terms of how it has affected my personal and professional life, so professional one is easier to describe. I'll start with that. Um, so my responsibilities at work at a cancer center at the medical school are teaching and doing research to come up with new treatments for cancer. Teaching can be done online. I did that. That was easy to adapt to that. But doing experiments in the lab, there's no way I can do that and do them at home. So for many months, I couldn't do any experiments in the lab. It was completely shut down. I was just doing some literature review, learning more about what's out there, planning new projects. So once things open up, which they did in June or July last week, from then on, we had limited capacity, working few hours at a time in a given day. really coordinating with everyone to maintain the occupancy limit of recommended by CDC. So that's been a challenge. However, now things have picked up back to speed by now in the lab. So that's professional life. Personal life, I think it is for me too. It has affected me similarly. So I couldn't see a lot of my friends. I couldn't travel. I couldn't drive out of state. So that led to some isolation. I could sense in me that um, I'm feeling a little more burdened or drained out slightly more easily than before. It was showing. So I found out that I need to meditate more. I need to schedule video calls with friends so I see their faces and their voices. So I tried to like Google Calendar all these meetings with friends all across the world. As most of my close friends and family, they're outside of this country or far away from New York City. Um, so that's how it affected the personal life. Now, where the personal and professional life integratedly got affected is in a good way in this case is I was thinking, what could I do besides doing my regular research to support this pandemic relief effort? We had jobs like handing out masks or uh, maintaining records of people and so on at the hospital. But at this time, I also got qualified to teach MBSR. And I thought, people are getting affected psychologically. There's so much stress going around in every single person that I met. So I thought this is something that I could volunteer for and really help people with. And that's when I began teaching MBSR online. And then many healthcare professionals, mental health professionals showed up, and medical students and graduate students. Some of my friends and colleagues at the cancer center, they showed up. Some of them are here right now attending this meeting. So that was like some opportunity that it gave me to serve. And that's continuing on to offer more mindfulness in similarly stressed out communities that I'm able to support through this practice.
Thank you, Tushar. What's coming to mind is that particularly folks that are essential workers, healthcare workers, folks that you're in contact with on a regular basis, I can only imagine the stressors that are just living in the body, in the mind of these folks in particular. And so I know for myself, my meditation practice has really changed over this past year. And sometimes I like to think of the practice as like, what can be resourceful? What feels resourceful for me right now? And it might not look like sitting down, putting aside a certain amount of time today to still the mind, quote unquote. So can you offer some different options to resource, and maybe you would have even more of a direct experience with this, and particularly with the populations that you work with?
All right, so resources. So some resources that I found helpful, and these are coming from MBSR, from other mindfulness techniques. So I'll speak about what I use for myself and then what I offer to the participants of mindfulness trainings. So I found three different elements, like to oversimplify and over summarize, three different elements that were helpful to me. One is increasing my interaction with people, which I had very less of, through any means. It could be standing 20 feet away from each other with 3 masks on and so on, and the face shield, but still going to Central Park to see them, going for a walk from far away while maintaining the safety. And then Zoom calls, phone calls, all of that. That is one, social interaction. Also increasing social interaction through teaching people online. The second element was about doing some formal practice, or I was doing some formal practice, but increasing that more. Like if I'm meditating, let's say an hour every day, then adding a few more minutes during the day for formal sitting meditation. The third part, which I found to be was more practically feasible for me and for also every other person that I was training in the mindfulness trainings, was there's like two parts to this third one, yeah, which is movement practice. So I was talking about some neuroscience this morning of mindfulness and how certain movements, they actually trigger certain parts of the brain, particularly the, let's say to summarize, the logical part of the brain. It triggers and activates and strengthens that part. Some movements that we can focus on because it creates some natural sensation due to moving. If I'm moving my legs, moving my hands, so walking meditation, or other movement meditation would be any activity meditation if I'm doing dishes and so on. I found that was easier for people to do rather than sitting quietly if they cannot sit for half an hour. So these three elements I found useful for myself, but the third one I found more useful to the participants. One extra element that I gave to the participants, which doesn't seem very apparent, is I said, what can you take away from your current activities that is depleting more energy from you? For example, it was very natural for people to binge watch shows, very natural for them to have more of what they like. Could be ice cream, could be any substance. It was very easy for that to happen. Yeah. To ask people what can they, let's say, step away from, uh, and what can they add among these different resources in their life. And even if there's something that they are trying to step away, how to do that mindfully, for example. If they are having their regular ice cream, their alcohol, or maybe cigarettes, I said you can actually kind of convert that into a mindful activity. Really take your time in experiencing every aspect of that. How does it feel to like touch the cold tub of ice cream? How does it feel to like dig the spoon in, taking the first bite, and so on? So there is so much research on this, but I can tell you about my direct experience with my students. They said, I find myself like eating less of ice cream. Sometimes I take a spoon or two or just not eat the whole thing. And for cigarette smoker, there's studies on that. They feel like, what is this terrible thing? It doesn't taste great at all. I'm doing this. So such insights come for people, the one I have spoken to. So these are a few resources. I mean, I went for hours and hours talking about this, but to summarize this, that's what I can say.
Thank you, Tushar. It's really great to get your experience and also to learn a little bit more about what works for your participants. And two things come to mind that I just want to name and highlight from what you just shared is that, um, you know, to bring just ways to resource when feeling particularly stressed, um, stressors that feel like they're pushing you toward attending to negative stimuli versus, maybe a more uplifting type of stimuli activating in a positive sense. Because stress is not, as we're learning, as I'm learning, neither negative or positive. It's just so working with it to the degree that feels comfortable. And I find I need resources. But what you shared was really inspiring about just, okay, where can we really feel into this? Maybe it's washing the dishes or really feeling the connection of the body meeting the dish and the water and sort of really what does washing dishes feel like, and then this maybe this empowering quality around maybe saying no or stepping away. So maybe that's inside of practices that are unhealthy like you described, or for myself, I'm a new mother about 2.5 months in with having a new child and just saying, okay, I'm going to say no to this activity and create some space over here, maybe to just sleep or maybe to just spend an extra minute looking out the window at a tree or something that might seem pretty ordinary, but when offering a little bit of space can feel really nourishing. So I just wanted to highlight and name that because I appreciate what you're saying. um, I noticed there's questions coming in, and I should have mentioned at the top of this that we are going to build in some time to have some questions for Tushar. So if you have any that are coming to mind, please feel free to continue writing them into the chat, and we'll open up some space. I just want to take a little bit more time here with you, Tushar, to ask if there's something inside of maybe your journey as a whole, so really in an expansive way, or if you want to focus in a more narrow sense with this past year inside of the pandemic, anything that you're learning from this ancient wisdom, these teachings, your practice.
Yeah, so if I were to distill this experience in what does that uncover for me? There are things that kind of get overlooked over the time by like getting busy with work, getting busy with teaching. But I really learned that how it nourished me to get in touch with people who I find nourishing. My friends from, let's say, middle school or primary school, my friends that I met in Israel, my friends that I met in Georgia, West Virginia. And I kind of still am in touch with them, but I don't get to have that interaction time with them, which feels really good and connecting. So the value of people, I might have taken them for granted because I feel like they're always there. When I'm calling them, I get them on phone. But then really intention setting to regularly interact with them, and I learned about that during this time. This is a heavy subject, but there were a bunch of deaths in the circle of people that I know. So this is like very big learning I had. Something I knew, that the life is limited, and I never know, not to be morbid, but the death meditation is a very important element of mindfulness in many traditions. So that's why I dare to bring this up and not step away from it. Learning about death, interacting with people who have limited amount of time, which I got a chance to interact with, um, gave me a lesson about the value of life and how does that translate in my action. Because I understand life is important. What do I do about it? Is forgiving people. If I have any grudge, I might, and then forgiving is not like for a big crime, but I might like be hesitant to reach out to them because I feel like something happened, was not great. So, okay, I'm not going to reach out. Even that involves forgiving. That would mean I'm reaching out to them. So forgiving and also being grateful to what I have, people that I have in life, people that I had in my life. They're no longer present in their body. But this combination of gratitude, forgiveness, and connected with the finite life that we have and how to guide my actions from it. This was my like very highlighted learning during this time.
Mm,
Um, yeah, so that's the top thing that came to me when you asked that.
mm. Yeah, thank you, Tushar. Yeah, it's not lost on me, um, particularly with my personal experience, but even witnessing and being immersed in the collective sense of this suffering with COVID-19 and having personal loss in my family and friends as well. Just how death can teach me to appreciate and maybe live more vibrantly because it's happening anyway, right? I'm alive anyway right now. And so, yeah, this past year exploring that. And I guess that even kind of circles back to my practice in meditation, just how I don't have to do things that I should be doing, quote unquote, but just what does feel like living,
Mhm.
what feels like being alive in the living. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you highlighting that. Um, yeah, what's coming to mind is that I'm just
Mm.
curious about if there are any guides, teachers,
Mm.
people that over the course of your 30 plus years of practicing have particularly inspired you. And if you
Mm.
wanted to speak to any of that.
Mm. Now this is a rather very important question for me personally, cause the tradition that I come from, I should say the culture that I come from, their teachers are revered even before God. They're like literature on this. A person says to their loved ones, if a teacher and God come to me, and then greeting someone is like the sign of respect. Who do I greet first? So they say you greet the teacher first and then the God. So now connecting this to, let's say, how this is connecting to my mentors, people I look up to. So coming here, to the stage I'm in life in terms of professional, personal accomplishment, it wouldn't be possible without the help and support and love, I should say, of many different teachers across many different cities and countries that I had. So I have immense amount of love and respect for them, for having supported me along the way. But some of them that come to my mind, and I would begin with the qualities of why did I love these teachers, is one, I really felt that they have sincere, honest intentions to really help me, to really guide me and teach me. That's where they are coming from. Their actions, intentions, everything was coming from there. Because they were embodied. Embodied is a word we often use in mindfulness world, which basically means they were walking the talk. For example, if they say, you should be inclusive of people, it's a good thing, it's good karma. Karma is a big thing in India. But then how to include people, how to be inclusive, actually doing that. I did feel included by my teachers, even though I was such a little student and they were accomplished professors and successful people in life. They treated me with respect. They made me feel heard. They made me feel included. Uh, so if I put some names to these qualities, some of the teachers that are, let's say, well known to the Western world is S.N. Goenka, who's a teacher of Vipassana. It's a very well-known mindfulness technique or mindfulness tradition that is present all across the world, more than 200 or 300 countries. He was an embodied person. He was a rich diamond merchant, but he channelized all his financial, his personal, spiritual energy into teaching mindfulness to the entire world without discriminating against race, country, language, or anything else. That is, one is him. The other person that comes to my mind is Yuval Noah Harari. You probably know him from his 3 books, Homo Deus, Sapiens, and 21 Lessons for 21st Century. He really, besides publishing all these books, he tries to live by what he teaches. And the examples of that is he practices mindfulness. Not only that, he's also a mindfulness teacher, besides being a professor at university, besides having what I call translational initiative of how does mindfulness translate into me helping the world? What do I exactly do? So he has an initiative called Sapienship. Other teachers that you probably are familiar with in the West are Oren J. Sofer, who's well known for his mindfulness, nonviolent communication, NVC. And an example of Oren that comes to my mind and why I find him to be so embodied and walking the talk, he tries to include the whole world in his talks, in his teachings. For example, he would give examples and stories from different parts of the world. He would not automatically go to Plato or Socrates. He'd find examples from Lao Tzu, from Tao Te Ching. You might find examples from the Mahabharata or from other smaller cultures, lesser known. Yuval Noah Harari also does the same thing. And then there are some, let's say, professional mentors that I had in life. My boss in Israel, my current boss here at Einstein at the Cancer Center. They all have this in common. They respect the person no matter how small or big in professional accomplishment, they treat them the same way. High school student or dean of a college, same way. And when they speak and when they interact with genuine intentions. So basically it all comes down to people I love are the ones who walk the talk. If I were to say that in one sentence.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tushar. That's wonderful. Um, well, I appreciate your unique experience, and your sharing of how you're in touch with the practice, and also just activating, core values like generosity, inclusivity, accessibility. And it is nice for me to experiment with my practice. Is this practice helping me, um, you know, be more accessible? And sometimes I just ask, like, is it present or not, without judging, but just knowing. And it's kind of a, for me, specifically this past year, it's been nice to really use the practice in a practical sense, like take it into my hands. Oh, this is something I can practice. It doesn't have to feel so big and overwhelming. And when it is, it's okay. I could put it down. It's not a panacea either. But I really appreciate your expansive way of being. And it truly is, I know from experience being with you, very inclusive and welcoming. So I appreciate that. I want to lastly just close and ask you if there's something that you want to bring up here about any of the projects that you're working on currently. Where can people find you? And of course, you're always teaching. So if people want to engage in any of your courses, anything at all here, Tushar, that you want to leave us with before we open up to some questions?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking. First of all, I want to thank you for that particular piece you added about the practical part of how is my practice showing up in the way I show up. Yeah. And then to like highlight what you just said is to ask people for feedback to see how am I showing up. Do you think you caught something that you can tell me, one positive thing, one thing that I have room for improvement? Some MBSR teachers might think, oh, this is coming from MBSR, but it has real practical value in what you just said, Jessica.
Mm.
But having said that, where can you find me? What am I doing currently? Um, so currently I'm doing two things. One, I'm continuing to teach MBSR. So I'm teaching MBSR at the Mindful Leader, and I'm teaching MBSR at the New York Insight Meditation Center. It's all online, but it's in New York. So that's the MBSR training or teaching I'm doing. I'm also doing some training for people in the medical world, for medical students, residents, and fellows, custom-made programs based on mindfulness, which fit their schedule, so they get a chance to really engage with that and not be shut out due to the long, let's say, duration of MBSR and their unpredictable schedules. So I'm doing that. But outside of that, I'm also teaching these regular, let's say 2 or 3 times a week, half-an-hour meditation sessions, which are open and pro bono for people. So I'm doing that for MBSR alumni on Zoom. And then I'm also doing some of those on the Insight Timer. So that's open to outside MBSR circle community. So those are some of my projects. So you can find me. Where can you find me? I think once you Google me, you find me on the Mindful Leader, New York Insight, and my work website might show up. It has some information. I also have a website which is like developing. It still has something on that, bewellmindfulness.org. But that's where you can find me. But Insight Timer is the one that people are finding me more easily now, and particularly to message and to reach out to me.
Great. Thank you, Tushar. I also want to highlight that you teach weekly with Studio B inside of this community. And for folks that are
Yes.
curious,
Yeah.
Studio B kindly offers a 2-week trial to sort of see, hey, does this
Mhm.
work with me? And there's so many teachers.
Yeah.
Tushar is one of them. And there are free
Mm.
classes throughout the week to check in with. Tushar, what day do you teach presently? I know
Mm.
this will change depending on when people absorb this interview.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thanks for emphasizing this. I kind of took it for granted that, oh, I'm here in Studio B, so of course, I teach at Studio B. But yes, I teach at Studio B, which is these 2 sessions that I'm mentioning, which are Monday noon time and Thursday 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think the time is shifting tomorrow, so it'll be 1 hour here and there. But yes, on Studio B. And then I engage with other workshops with Studio B as and when they are needed and offered and when I have time. So yes, some of these Studio B activities as well.
Yes, thank you so much. And just to highlight, because I know inside of this community, we all know that, but for folks that are going to be listening at a later date, I wanted to make sure that was also noted.
Makes
Thank you so
sense.
much, Tushar.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have about 15 minutes left to the hour here, and I want to open up. There are some questions that already came in,
Mm.
and I can certainly ask those, but I'll start also by asking Mariah, you have a question here for Tushar. If you want to unmute and bring your voice in, otherwise, I'm happy to facilitate this question as well.
Thank you. I can certainly do that. I just have my screen off because I'm outside and the sun is glaring. Tushar, I would really appreciate if you could speak to what would you say to someone who believes that all the conspiracy theories around the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, that it's unsafe, that it's going to change your DNA, that it's a way to get control over the world, et cetera, both from a medical perspective and a mindfulness perspective?
This is a very big and important question. And I guess all of us hear this from everywhere. But I will speak from my direct personal experience about this. So as a scientist, the technology for this COVID vaccine that they're using, I actually use that similar technology of microRNA or small RNA in my first publication in PhD. So I'm very familiar with the way this works. And the second part, my very close friend, a very dear friend who I know really well, she has developed a COVID vaccine herself in University of Texas, which has undergone trial in South Korea and then in use. So I know this from two different angles. Now, adding the microchip and altering the DNA, I often alter DNA in cells for my scientific experiments. So I also know how that works. First of all, it's not very easy to alter the DNA in your body just by injecting small oligos. Even if they injected like full-fledged DNA, it's very difficult. We have this entire DNA, let's say, molecule with all different elements to, let's say, motors, if you will, and yet it fails. So doing this so randomly just with an injection, what comes to my mind is gene therapy that was first done in France decades ago, and how long it took them to really make that work, and it still failed. So the likelihood of DNA altering are very let's say rare. It's very rare for that to happen. It would most likely or most often fail. And knowing my friend and few others who have developed the vaccine, I know that it's not something to add a microchip to a person. It's not for altering the DNA. Knowing how it works, which I have personally done, that is not the case. That's what I would say. Now, in terms of the spiritual world perspective, now that's the deeper question. So I grew up with like a scientific mindset even before becoming a scientist. I wanted evidence for everything. As I learn more and more in science, I find out that science has found out some things, but there's so much more it doesn't know. A very good example to give you is a neuroscience. A very small percent, I think maybe 20 or 12% or something, if I'm not misquoting. It's a very small portion of the brain that is understood functionally, and so much more is not known, despite what we might think, how far science has advanced in particularly US and Russia and all other leading countries. So the bottom line, long story short, is no, it's very difficult to do this. Personally, I don't think that is the case. Adding microchips, altering the DNA, it would rather keep people alive, keep them safe by being vaccinated. And mindfully, I think, let's see how to put that in here. That's where the trust and faith using scientific information comes in, being mindful of the source of information. And does it really make sense? Now, an example comes to my mind is a flat earth. And then what I would ask people to do is to get their information sources from different parts of the world, because it would be very difficult for one umbrella organization to run conspiracies in many different countries, in many different communities. That would be incredibly hard. So the likelihood of that is almost non-existent. Yeah. So the flat earth theory is a very good conspiracy one, which really fails significantly, because if I talk about Indian astrology, independent of the Western science, they too describe the planets and Earth to be round and not flat. So I hope that should help you a little bit.
Yes, that was very helpful, Tushar. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It might also be helpful to say where you are tuning in from if you feel safe about that. Probably helps people feel like they are connected across the miles or across the seas, if you are from across the seas.
Thank you for that invitation, Tushar. I realized my microphone was unmuted for just a second, but I'm tuning in from Long Island, New York, currently at my sister's home, and very grateful for her and her offer to take care of me in this time. I wanted to bring out a couple of more questions that were in the chat.
It's coming down.
There's looks like just to mention that Joe Zambri's square is unmuted, so maybe if you can mute yourself again, that would be great. Okay, here we are. So it says in the chat that Noel says, I ate a half tub of ice cream for breakfast in the morning, straight out of the container. Okay, so thank you for sharing your experience. Anything else you want to add to that, Noel?
Nothing in particular. It was funny to hear you talking about it, Tushar. That was very, very specific for me today. But yeah, and I have to say there was a lot of ice cream quickly, but I did think about it while I was in there. And I was like, well, if I'm gonna do this, this is my breakfast. I'm going to really like sit here and just do it. I didn't read, I didn't look at anything. I just sat there and ate the ice cream. So anyway, but yeah, thank you. It's great to be able to hear this talk and hear both of you speak together. This is really nice. Appreciate it.
What was it, by the way? Ben and Jerry's or Haagen-Dazs?
I forget what the brand is, but it was a smaller farm, cookies and cream.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Noel. Important point to highlight here is that Noel was intentional. He knew that this is what he's doing and this is his breakfast. And contrasting that with some experiences that I hear is about, oh, I went to the freezer, I took the tub and I didn't know when it was over. So the person was not with the ice cream. In your case, it sounded like you were with the ice cream. Yeah. So I would support that if you're going for it.
I was with it this time, but there have been many times before that were not quite that same experience. But yeah, thanks again.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. And there's a question here from Hildy, just asking Tushar if you'd like, put the names of your teachers in the books in the chat at some point. And maybe we can do that. Oh, there, you're doing it right now. Perfect. Wonderful. And Hildy's also letting us know, thank you, that she's in Ireland, an hour south of Dublin.
So I'll make a list of these things and then you can just convey that to people. I can add more names to that with that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great because this this conversation will live on the Studio B platform in part of their interview series. And so maybe we can add some resources there. Thank you. And Rachel says she'll be happy to include them on the blog as well. So thank you so much for that, Rachel. Yeah, there's some more time here if there's any questions coming to mind. Yeah. Oh, Jen, please come in. Our founder, Studio B's founder. Welcome.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Tushar. Hi, Jess. It's so good to be here. I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania today. So happy to be here from the city today. I really have a practical question, and this is just out of curiosity. I often find that I come down really hard on myself if I don't have time for those long formal practices. And some days or some weeks, there's only 12 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And I'm feeling less tethered to a foundation that feels steady. And so I lean into the informal practices, as Jess articulated earlier, of washing your hands and knowing you're washing your hands. And that feels really natural for me. But it's also different than maintaining a really consistent formal practice. And I'm just wondering if there's science that can explain, or if you could articulate why I noticed that, and why a formal practice is so important cognitively.
Yeah, this is a question that is maybe the most asked question, but how much of formal practice, how much of informal, how long should I practice? I beat myself so much, I'm hard on myself so much. So as you're asking, few people were coming to my mind. First of all, I'll address the beating myself for things, beating myself for like not meditating and being distracted all the time and eating ice cream for all my meals. So there are two researchers that come to my mind, and Dan Siegel and then Brene Brown. So they say Brene Brown works on, she researches vulnerability and also shame that's connected to this beating yourself up. And then Dan Siegel talks about the neuroscience of how beating yourself actually strengthens the default mode network of your brain. And then that habit might get stronger. So you get more and more beating yourself. So what would help in those moments is bringing, let's say, two things, which is maybe the same thing, but it has two steps to that: acceptance and then mindful self-compassion. I recently completed some course with Christine Neff and Chris Germer, which dwelled deeper into self-compassion and how that would feed into you being able to not beat yourself up. Yeah. So how does that look like when you're doing it on your own before doing long trainings on this? Step one, say it's okay. Right now, I feel like eating ice cream. It's okay. I'm not going to beat myself up. Yeah, you do it once, twice, thrice. Every single time you do that, you become okay with yourself. Say that it's okay. It's not a bad thing. I'm okay. I'm okay. So that's acceptance, which also includes not judging yourself. Then going one step further to offer self-compassion to yourself, which could include giving yourself gratitude for the things you actually do right. Yeah. And Christine Neff's research actually shows how this brings about the shift in this habit. So having said something about the beating yourself, the second part of how long do I meditate and how important is formal practice. So two people that came to my mind is my top favorite, Dr. Richard Davidson, who has done like brain scans, all neuroscience research on lay people, Buddhist monks, the happiest person in the world, Matthew Ricard, and so on. I can go on and on about that for long, but I will summarize Richard Davidson's work, and then Amishi Jha, who's a cognitive neuroscientist from University of Miami. So one of her papers describes that formal practice is important, and particularly for attention development, developing your concentration and focus on whatever you're doing. 12 minutes is the initial recommended amount, and you build upon that. Yeah, 12 minutes seems to kind of help you continue a regular practice. So it doesn't sound like a huge amount of time, maybe manageable, maybe difficult for some people, but that's where you can begin. Yeah. And then, yes, adding more time to the formal practice is important. Because if I were to say that, okay, I need to go dig a mountain, that's my task. I've seen all YouTube videos of how to do that, like take something, dig something, throw the mud and stones and all that. But what do I need for that? I need to begin with my physical training. If otherwise, I'll break all sorts of things, tendons and ligaments and all sorts of body disintegration. So similarly, for mindfulness, one needs to build that mind muscle, if you will, yeah, through formal practice. And then even the integrative practices, the movement practices, washing the dishes, focusing on showering, those become more, let's say, likely. So it's like both and adding both, not just sticking to one, not just sticking to the other, but going on with the holistic approach. an all around, I would say, big picture approach. So I hope that addresses both of your questions, Jan.
Thanks, Jen, for the question. Thank you all for your questions. I'm mindful of the time, and I just want to point out just before we close, because there's a few people that are saying hello here. Roy is saying hello from Holland. Mariah is saying hello from Manasquan, New Jersey in the US, land of the Lenape and Algonquin. And thank you for pointing that out. This is indigenous land that Mariah points to. And if anyone is curious what land they're currently standing on, living with, they can go to a website and it's, I believe it's native-land.ca, and maybe we can put that into the chat if you're curious. Thank you, Mariah, for bringing that in. Clement is saying hello from 25 miles west of Paris, and Janine is saying hello from Cambridge, UK, Andrea from Vancouver, and Rachel from Basel, Switzerland. Mary is saying hello from Harlem, New York City, the Lenape territory. So thank you so much for all of you showing up and being here, and Tushar, especially for your presence and your kind generosity and just letting us know a little bit more about you and your journey. If there's anything that you'd like to close with, please feel free.
Yeah, I want to extend my gratitude to all these people tuning from all corners of the world. Thank you for staying awake if you're awake at a different time zone and really being present and listening in and creating this space even through your listening. So I want to thank you all for that. So I want to close with one of the songs from my favorite one of my favorite mindfulness teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm deeply connected with that community as well, which kind of highlights that there is no beginning or end, it's continuation. So there's that song that I would like to, is like 2 lines to that. I'd like to sing those to you or recite those to you. It says, no coming, no going, no after, no before. I hold you close to me. I release you to be so free, because I am in you and you are in me. Because I am in you and you are in me. So there's no coming, there's no going, because we are all interdependent and interconnected. And he says that so succinctly and so beautifully. So I appreciate your presence and your connection here. And we'll be continuing. We'll see each other in another platform, another place, and also through practice. Who knows, we might be meditating at the same time.
Thank you
You have
so
a
much.
wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tushar. Thank you all. See you really soon.
See you.